Hi everyone. So now that the 150 is finally done after 2 weeks of pushing, I'm quite glad. I decided to go over my setup again a little bit and discuss the changes that I made. So my gear is still overall the same. It didn't really change or improve or anything because, well, I was mostly just pushing and then getting a few keys and then pushing more. So obviously there was no opportunity to get anything. But I did change a few things around. And that is namely the ring with elusive ring versus convention, and also the gem which was trapped versus esoteric. So these are the two choices that you have for the most part. And I also experimented a little bit with my skills. So when I started out, I had smoke screen with vanishing powder, and I had shadow power with gloom to give me damage reduction. So this was my only discipline spender, and a smoke screen was supposed to kind of like give me a button to survive the really big hits or when I'm really struggling. So I realized that this is not consistent enough, and I actually changed that rather early actually. I did experiment a little bit. I was running, for example, only preparation plus shadow power with gloom. Gives you a nice damage reduction, especially if you pair it with a fan of knives here. But in the end, I had the same issue that in some situations when there was a lot of incoming damage, when there was, beasts charging at me, when there was molten explosions, arcane beams, whatever, like the stuff that really hurts, it would still kill me, even with all of damage reduction. So I went with smoke screen in the end. So we had preparation, focused mind, plus smoke screen special recipe. So we have the discipline region, plus we have a lower cost on smoke screen. And this way I can almost entirely spam it all the time. So basically I can just press it on cooldown, and smoke screen has a rather short cooldown. So in those situations where I have a lot of incoming damage from lots of elite affixes and ghosts and archers or whatever, you can use this 1 second smoke screen to heal up all the time. So that was really nice. And also it would make it so that I can very consistently use my season theme procs, which is very important. I play around the season theme almost entirely, including on the Rift Guardian. You have to tank the Rift Guardians in the right spot. You have to be able to survive those hits, and depending on which Rift Guardian that is, it might be quite difficult to do so. So with smoke screen, you can actually time it, when there's like a Bloodmore standing next to you and hitting you once every 2 seconds. You can just press the smoke screen at the right time every time, and you will never take any damage, basically. Same with, some other hard-hitting bosses. And this way, I actually managed to survive pretty well. I did use Perfectionist on top of this, so instead of going for damage passive, the next best one would probably be the archery here. So that's 5% crit chance. The hated regen is whatever. So I decided that this is not really worth, and Perfectionist will help me more here. This Perfectionist is not really a super crazy passive, but it's also not bad. For me, I tried to go with numbing traps, but I have no way of really applying it well, and also it's a little bit less consistent. So with Perfectionist, you get the armor and the resistance. It's 10% each, and that is like overall, I don't know, usually around 15 to 18% toughness or so. And then the numbing traps of 25% reduction is quite a bit more, so you can expect this to be worth something like 25 to 30% toughness. It's not going to be up on all targets at all times, and when an enemy spawns like an arcane beam before you apply numbing traps, then that arcane beam will still deal full damage, for example. So it's less consistent, and Perfectionist is kind of like a nice middle ground because it's on the character and not on the enemy. So end of this. And on top of that, you have the discipline cost reduction, which actually got me to the point where I was able to completely spam smoke screen when I needed to, with the reset cost reduction I have. So overall, I was quite happy with the skill setup here. I used the fan of knives in the end. You can use better defensive options here. For example, you could actually go with smoke screen plus shadow power, but the thing is this will drain your discipline really fast, even with preparation up. So you can use this for those moments where you're really struggling. And then, there are also a lot of situations where I didn't even have to press smoke screen, for example, when I'm just kiting around, when there's not really much going on, you can actually refill your discipline. And most of the time I actually had preparation up and full discipline, and there was no reason to press smoke screen. I actually avoided doing it in many cases, and I would have been quite happy to have the shadow power to actually not go invisible, because when you go invisible, it makes it quite likely that enemies stop following you, and you basically want to have them follow you all the time. So yeah, actually going quite tanky is an option, but this only really works when you have a lot of risk cost reduction. But luckily there is one way of doing that, and this is Yang's V-curve. So Yang's V-curve has this fixed 50% resource cost roll, So you can use something like this, and Morpher actually used the Yang's V-curve to clear his own 150. And this is also something that I thought about earlier, and I'm actually quite interested to see that he did that exactly with the setup. So this is definitely a pretty good option. You know, bow is not the most DPS by itself, but it has, you know, with the 50% resource cost reduction, it does give you the option for the Shadow Power instead of Fan of Knives. And Fan of Knives gives you something like around 15% toughness, and this definitely cannot match the 35% damage reduction you gain from Gloom here. So this is pretty big. This is like a 50% toughness increase. So, you know, even with the difference calculated in, that's still like over a 30% boost or so for your toughness. So this is definitely a pretty nice option that can help you out here if you actually happen to have a really good Yang's recurve. You can just, you know, go with it. And Yang's recurve is quite easy to roll well anyway. You don't care about the legendary effects. You don't even care that it has discipline or not. So, you know, getting a decent Yang's recurve is not really such a big deal. Now to take a look at the Etrayu here. This is the one that cleared the 150 first, which was my clanmate Remind. He was a few days before me, and he used this bow, and I got a lot of questions about like why Etrayu, what's up with that and so on. And the thing is, it's just a bow. It's just a slightly above average bow basically, because you replace what in most cases would be dexterity with cold damage, and in most cases this means something like a 10%, maybe 12% damage boost, and that's it. And a little bit of a toughness loss basically because of the armor loss. So this is that. So it's not bad, it's not really crazy either. I'd say it's probably kind of on par with the Valor's Bequest setup that I've been running, with the advantage of Valor's Bequest being that I actually get more healing because you have a little bit more 4-piece procs. But yeah, with Etrayu you also have the option to go with the perfect 9 frames breakpoint. And depending on your positioning inside the pool, like especially when you stay inside the pool with a bow, then you have a rather consistent, close to perfect frame animation basically. So in those cases, you can actually deal more damage with a bow than with the Valor's Bequest setup, but it also kind of hinders you in your movement because you want to stay basically inside the pool. This also means that some of the arrows will actually fly in the wrong direction. So I think overall, it's hard to estimate, but it's probably going to average out somewhere. But in short, if you have a really good Etrayu, then don't hesitate to go with it. If you were going for no Fortress Ballista setup anyway, it's decent and definitely it works. And then talking about Fortress Ballista. So a lot of people, especially on the more casual levels, you know, like if you're like on 130 or 140 or so, they push with Ballista and Squirts. And yes, this is also the way to go that I would recommend for most people. When you're not going super crazy with your fishing, you know, when you just want to use your, I don't know, 50, 100 keys or whatever, and you have Stricken equipped and you're not doing this crazy season theme stuff like I did, then yeah, Fortress Ballista does help you a lot with the squirts, and that means that you have a much easier time killing bosses, and in the Rift you can also keep up the squirts sometimes. So if you play well and you have Lizard Ring and so on, first of all, it's going to make you quite tanky for those really tough situations where you might be dying otherwise. And on top of that, you know, in those easy times, you actually do get the damage bonus from the squirts. So overall, it's a nice combo, and I can just recommend that overall for like the more casual pushing. And then the flavor, you know, the flavor, basically when you push with this Amulet, you need to have a conduit in the Rift, and it needs to be a pretty good conduit to make this worth, you know, especially on a setup where squirts actually kind of works half the time or so on the Demon Hunter with the Fortress Ballista. So the opportunity cost is very high for equipping Flavor of Time. So you need to get a lot out of it, and in my case, I wanted to get really big conduits, and I did spawn 3 bosses in time without getting a conduit with using this setup. So basically this entire Flavor of Time was wasted. You know, instead of Valas, I could have actually gone Squirts plus Ballista. And overall, you know, this is kind of hard to estimate the average gain of Squirts, the average gain of Flavor. But typically, the setups are quite close. But as I said, on the casual end, I definitely recommend the Ballista plus Squirt setup. Yeah, so in the end, the final change that I made is actually running with the convention. So this is kind of like a novelty here because almost no one can afford to run the convention. But in my case, that actually worked pretty well because of the esoteric and because I have a lot of physical resistance. So I really tried hard to get physical resistance items and actually managed to get the craziest stuff ever. So you've probably seen the gear, but here again, we have the physical helm, we have the physical chest, we even have the physical bracers. This one is absolutely nuts. So this is so hard to roll, and I somehow got lucky and actually got it. We have a non-ancient physical ring, and we have the pants. I mean, pants is kind of like the one expected piece that will have physical res, I guess, maybe alongside the helm. So helm and pants, you should have physical res because they're rather easy to get, and you don't really need much on these pieces. So chest, yeah, maybe you get something like melee reduction or range or whatever, or maybe some other nice res and good stats. Okay. Bracers, it's too rare to get a good roll to decide here. Same with the rings, same with the flavor. So I got lucky, I had it on one ring. So this is kind of a good outcome, I guess. I got really lucky with the gloss too. So yeah, my physical res is insane. With Perfectionist, I'm close to 2.4k. Without Perfectionist, it's still like 2.2 almost. And yeah, ridiculous. And you can imagine that with Esoteric giving me this big toughness boost towards all non-physical damage types, I was really tanky. So overall, this puts me at around 1.5 billion toughness. And I would not really recommend to go much below that if you want to go for like a really high push, like 140 plus. Because you do have to tank a lot of elites. You have to tank a lot of enemies and so on. And yeah, you can make up for this with more vitality, but on top of all this res and esoteric, I also had 7k vitality. So I was running really tanky. And this is how it works, because you benefit a lot from the big pulls, you benefit a lot from area damage, and then the season theme, it can go really crazy when you actually manage to get those pulls and you survive them. So this is how I did it. And with the convention being kind of like unconditional damage, like the choice here was trapped plus elusive ring or esoteric plus convention, and I chose this setup here because it allows me to stay outside of the pull. I don't need to slow anything, so it was overall just working much better. And I also like to play around the convention cycle, so I'm pretty good at this, I guess, but I also enjoy it more. And it also felt like it was better for my setup here. So if you can survive, with the amount of resist I have and so on, I would definitely recommend Esoteric as a third gem instead of the Stricken if you want to go for like this crazy seasonal fishing. But yeah, if you're like on the lower end and you're really struggling to survive anyway, it doesn't hurt to just throw in an Esoteric anyway. So when you're just like starting out, or you're not so experienced and so on, or you have really crappy gear, giving up a damage gem like Taeguk is quite big, but it doesn't hurt. When you have a level 100 Esoteric, you're gonna be very tanky. With elusive ring, without elusive ring, definitely worth trying. But overall, if you should try to not have to use Esoteric when you want to run Stricken, and then just fix your issues with elusive ring for the most part. And lastly, I want to discuss the question of crossbows, because I also mentioned this in like the FAQ video, and you can also go with crossbows if you like. So if you were going for a setup that kind of works like Valas, so it's nothing special about Valas, it's just more damage and more healing, that's it. So you can just as well use any other weapon that actually does something, like the crossbow has much higher damage per shot, so it's quite close to the Valas anyway. And in this case, you can just craft a crossbow if you like. You can just go to the blacksmith, you can craft arcane barbs, and if you're really struggling to get a good weapon, or you're not really going to farm that much, bounties or whatever, you can try this, and you can craft them for quite cheap. They cost like one material here, and a little bit of like the white, blue, yellow. That's it. So you craft like 50 of those, and you're most likely gonna have a pretty decent piece. So you can try this if you really can't get any good weapons. And there you go. But the thing is, you need to get a good quiver then, and getting a quiver is quite hard. I've gambled like 400k shards, and in the end I went with the dual wield setup because I just couldn't get the quiver that I wanted. So like a quiver plus a Valor would be slightly higher DPS, simply because of how the math turns out, but it's just very hard to get. You need to get like a close to maximum roll quiver basically, because I already had pretty decent weapons, and in this case it just didn't work out for me. This is the reason why I went dual wield. But ultimately, it would be Valor plus a quiver and then a Dawn in the cube. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my insights here and this cleared up a few things, and I'll see you guys next time.